Welcome back to the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BOL, alongside team experts Clint Lamb, right there beside me. And then down in that bottom square, of course, Jimmy Stein, Esquire, to the extreme, to the hilt, Jimmy Stein, joining us on a Tuesday morning. It is February the 6th, 2024. Guys, we haven't done a 3 for 3 in a little bit. I figured it was about time to get this thing going again.
Yeah, I've missed you guys.
Yeah, that sounded like it, Clint. That really sounded, like you've missed our time here. But we're into 3 topics. We are live, by the way. So if you'd like to chime in via the comments, we certainly welcome that interaction as well. Guys, there are a lot of topics from which we could choose. I mean, you've got an Alabama men's basketball team set to take on Auburn down on the Plains Wednesday night. Huge matchup with SEC and NCAA tournament implications. I saw, by the way, Andy Staples of the On3 Network talking about Alabama's early over-under win total for 2024, year one under Kalen DeBoer. 9.5 apparently out in Vegas, Clint. You can get that right now. Does that attract your attention either way, or are you one of those people, kind of like myself, there's no way such an over-unders in early February?
I mean, yeah, it's a little early to be doing over-unders, but at the same time, I've kind of made predictions, and I think, undefeated is possible in the regular season, I suppose. I think 9-3 is probably the floor. 8-4 is probably the floor. I think the two most realistic 9-3 or 10-2. So that's kind of what I've already said. That falls right in line with 9.5. So, I mean, I get it, but I've said with me, it's early, and it's early for them too.
Jimmy, I guess we're going to get into this with 3 for 3 because we're going to talk under the radar opponents for the 2024 season. That's really what it comes down to. It's not so much always what we know or we think we know in February. When you look at teams like LSU and you look at Georgia and Tuscaloosa, and you look at even Oklahoma late in the season to go along with the Auburn Tigers. We'll talk about this in a little bit. Sometimes it's the games you don't think about as much that determine that.
What stands out to me, going back to that 9.5 number, is seems that under Saban, that number each year annually was sort of stuck at like 10.5, 10.5, 11.5, somewhere in that 11 range. And it does feel like Alabama is docked a win. I mean, so like the coaching transition is like, okay, Saban's gone, that's -1. It's kind of what it feels like. But I agree with Clint's notion that the most likely outcomes at this point, in terms of like what's the most likely thing to happen, 10-2, 9-3, I think are more likely than 11-1 or 8-4. But it's too early. It's too early to know. I mean, I know we're going to get into it on the show, which is great, but I don't think it's fair to really put a number on it until we see what happens following the spring portal.
I think part of it too could be that you're bringing Oklahoma and Texas into the league, right? You're adding Oklahoma to the Alabama schedule. That being said, you're taking Ole Miss off. So I think there could be strong debate right now as to who the better team is right now. Is it Oklahoma? Is it Ole Miss? So some give and take there, which goes back to you guys and what you've said about we've heard about Saban discount, maybe Alabama being discounted a win in the early over-under totals. But one of the topics we're going to get into this morning is, and I guess I need to preface this by saying no program benefits by losing Nick Saban as its head coach. That's not the implication in any form or fashion here. But we know that whether it's attrition at a particular area, whether it is a change in philosophy, going to a different concept, maybe defensively, offensively, there are guys on this roster and even some newcomers, right, that could certainly benefit from the change that is coming to Tuscaloosa on the football field. So that's where we'll start first. Clint, let's get going with you. You're one or two maybe guys that you see perhaps benefiting from the change to Kalen DeBoer, to these somewhat different concepts, maybe in different areas of the game.
Well, I think schematically, defensively, there are a couple of guys who benefit. I'd certainly think that Jordan Renaud, LT Overton, that style of player probably benefits. I think that you don't have as much of a need to move some of these guys inside in certain situations as maybe you would under the previous staff. I think whether it be those two guys, Jamarian Latham, even though I think he's more comfortable inside, so it's like if he is going to continue to get playing time until he proves he can be like a 3-down, early down run defender as well as being an interior pass rusher on passing downs. I'll be curious to see what his role ends up looking like. But those would be the two guys schematically. But when you look at like departures and stuff, anybody that was on all aboard the Justice Haynes Jam Miller train going into the 2023 season, you lose Jace McClellan, you lose Roydell Williams. I mean, I think that both those two guys are going to benefit, even though maybe there won't be as much of an emphasis on the run game as there was under Tom, with where they were planning on taking things with under Tommy Rees. I still think that as far as being your headliners, getting plenty of opportunities, I think Haynes and Miller both benefit from at least a couple of departures there in the backfield.
Who do you got, Jimmy? Who is your maybe one on offense, one on defense that you could see fitting into this category?
Okay, on defense, I'm stealing Clint's answer a little bit because I just think to me it's so apparent, and that's LT Overton. I think he's a guy that's he had a difficult scheme fit at A&M. Maybe they put him in a bad spot. Maybe they didn't have a spot custom built for him in their front seven. So much of the front seven is schematic fit everywhere, college, NFL, fitting the right guy in the right position. It seems like in this new scheme, the bandit position is sort of built for an LT Overton. And if Alabama under the old scheme, under Saban's scheme, tried to make him a down lineman, he was going to have to gain considerable weight and size. And Jack linebacker, he'd have been stuck with the same situation he had at A&M. Like, I'm not really sure that's a spot for him. But this new bandit position just feels like, hey, this was made for a guy built exactly like LT Overton with his skill set. So to me, the schematic change best benefits him if I'm going to pick one guy on defense. Offensively, how about Emmanuel Henderson at wide receiver? And I say that simply because last year Saban was making a concerted effort to run the darn ball. I think there was a run the ball movement, and that's why we saw so much more 12 personnel last year than we had in previous years. You got, as Clint pointed out, Jam Miller and Justice Haynes going to be sort of the show at running back. I think under Saban there would have been, had Saban stayed on, a continued emphasis on physicality in terms of running the ball. But here comes Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, not so much what I would say devoted to the idea of spread, no huddle, let's throw it 60 times. It's not that at all. But I do think that there will be more wide receivers used. It will be more of a wide receiver friendly offense. Look, at Saban State, we know we were going to see Prentice. We know we were going to see Kendrick Law. We knew Jeremy Bernard coming in. He's obviously going to play a lot. But by playing more receivers, now you're getting some guys who are fourth, fifth, sixth in the rotation. They're getting more snaps. And the guy that stands out to me is Emmanuel Henderson. I think Henderson is a guy that's going to play substantially more snaps this season under DeBoer than he would have under Saban.
I like him. I like the Jordan Renaud mention from Clint to get things going because, I know a lot of studies been done of Kane Womack and his defense at South Alabama. I've watched Washington too because they were essentially playing a similar defense in 2023. And what I saw were a couple of edge guys, one 255, one 274. I'm kind of all for whoever the Braylon Trice is going to be on this Alabama roster. You watch that guy for Washington last season at 6'4", 274 pounds. And so you physically start trying to come up with some fits, right, in terms of measurables. And Renaud, he came to Alabama as probably more of an edge guy. And he was in the process, or has been in the process, of trying to get maybe more to that 280, 285 range where you can get multiple with him, play him as a base in, move him inside in some passing situations in the old scheme. So I could see Jordan Renaud still standing up if he needs to. They like to stand these guys up at the, what is it, the Wolf and the Bandit. The Bandit is the defensive end. I know Clint's done a great job of breaking this down for us at BamaOnline.com. The Wolf is more of the outside linebacker, edge type. I'll tell you another guy. When I think of Braylon Trice and I think about measurables that could fit, I think about Keon Keeley. And you look at his pedigree as a 5-star recruit, you wonder if it's too early maybe still for Keon Keeley and even Jordan Renaud, but just big picture thinking about fits defensively, those would be a couple of guys. What about in the secondary, guys? This is a defense that, from what I can tell, plays more of a field and boundary approach with the corners. When you watch Jabbar Muhammad, for example, for Washington last year, I believe he was a field guy, and he really thrived in that. So I think of Damani Jackson, because when I think field corners, I think more speed and the ability to cover ground. When I think boundary, Clint, I'm thinking physicality, guys that you'll see come up and press at that spot. Damani Jackson obviously was brought in with the intent that he would play in Nick Saban's defense, but I think probably at either spot, but maybe more so field, Damani Jackson could be very, very good. If I'm a corner or I'm a defensive back, I'm very excited about this approach because you look at the takeaway numbers, the interception numbers, those type of things, the eyes to the quarterback approach that we're going to see, Clint, it lends itself to some fun numbers for those guys.
Yeah, field, I actually think Hurley at this point, from what I've seen, which is so limited, but just high school, lacked physicality a little bit. The athleticism, though, is there enough. I kind of probably view him more as a field corner right now. Damani Jackson, more of a field guy. When you talk about prototypical boundary corner, I think is Zay Mincy. I mean, I think he is exactly what you look for. He's got the size. He's very physical. Kind of has that safety corner hybrid blend where it's like you feel like he could hold up from a physical standpoint, the safety position. I think that, I don't know if he'll be ready to go from day one. I think Xavier Brown is probably the most college-ready corner of the ones that they added. And I think he brings a little bit of, a boundary corner as well. He can be physical enough. I also think he's got some athleticism. I don't think he's the most athletic guy that Alabama will have at the position, but he's very balanced, technically refined. But Zay Mincy, to me, if Hurley does end up being more of a guy, which granted, it's you can play it really, you need to have the athleticism to cover the field side, where it's going to a lot more open space. Boundary probably going to get targeted more. You need to be more physical. You're playing more in a confined area. So some of these guys will be able to play both, and it won't really matter too much. But I think that if you're really looking for a boundary guy that could hold up physically, and Zay Mincy proves to be ready to contribute near one, I think he could be a heck of a boundary corner for Alabama. And that would leave, a guy like Damani Jackson, who's got that athleticism, out there on the field side.
I'll tell you what, Jimmy, I think about Mincy at that Husky position too, which has been the star position previously under Nick Saban, because it looks to me like under Kane Womack, even against 3 and 4 wide receiver personnel on 3rd and 8, probably going to stay in the 4-2-5. So you got to have a guy that can still cover. You certainly a physical presence on early downs. He gets the run at that position too. And again, not sure if it's this year. Maybe it's more Tony Mitchell this year or State Pipe this year. Or maybe it is the corner, because I think Washington went with 3 runners in their 4-2-5 with a couple of safeties. But boy, I think as they missed, I guess the point being at a number of shots, whether it's this year or in the years to come.
Yeah, Zay seems to be a guy that's going to have a lot of versatility due to his size. And obviously that Husky position is going to be for a versatile DB that can do a lot of things, that can do the corner things, that can do safety things, and maybe to some extent do linebacker things, because when you play a 4-2-5, in essence, you're taking a linebacker off the field. You're replacing a linebacker with a DB. So that DB has to be able to do some linebacker type things. Now that said, in the SEC, you're playing against a lot of spread teams that use a lot of receivers, and that's why Washington used 3 corners so much. I think what I'm curious to see, guys, is that star position, the new Husky spot, is it going to be filled by a corner or a safety or even a cover linebacker? But more interesting than that to me is it going to be the same guy all the time? Maybe it's a position you sub out based on down and distance, based on offensive personnel. Maybe in Husky, it's Malachi Moore on some downs and Tony Mitchell on other downs, or Zay Mincy on other downs. We're going to all be introduced to this in the spring. It won't just be the players learning it. It's going to be guys like us learning it too, in terms of how Womack goes about this. But in terms of, my early thought is, I anticipate seeing Malachi Moore out there a lot at the Husky spot. He might not be the ideal. That might be what they're inheriting, but still, I think he's best suited in terms of what DB currently on the team with experience has some cornerback traits, has some safety traits, but is tough enough to play in the box like a linebacker. To me, that's Malachi Moore now. I could see it being Tony Mitchell down the road. I can see it being Zay Mincy down the road. But for now, I see it as Malachi Moore. And frankly, he's played at a near All-American level at that nickel corner spot in the past. It's actually a position of strength for Alabama if it's Malachi. And that's what I suspect we will see this spring. But I'm as curious as anyone else as to what it's going to look like.
A couple of things
probably
real quick. I do want to mention, I think when you talk about players who benefit from departures and things like that, Tony Mitchell, man. I mean, Caleb Downs was supposed to be back. Christian Story could have been back. Yeah. Jake Pope could have been back. You have Jalen Key, who has exhausted all of his eligibility. So you're talking about a guy who would have been fighting for a spot, trying to get some sort of playing time, probably would have continued to play more in a special teams role and been another year away. He's got a great opportunity to come in and kind of be one of those 3 safeties if that's the approach that Alabama wants to take. So when you're talking about, the differences in last year's roster and this year's roster and just the changes, I think a guy like Tony Mitchell, he's got some talent and he's got some of that ability. I agree with Jimmy. I've been very pro Tony Mitchell at the Husky position. He makes a lot of sense there from a skill set standpoint. If he proves ready from the mental side of things, I could see him ending up being a really important part of this defense, whether it be at safety or at Husky.
And some of these freshmen, obviously, from this massive defensive back class are going to have a say or two in things. Peyton Woodyard comes to mind as a young safety, especially after what we saw from Caleb Downs in 2023. I'll tell you, from the past, who probably would have been a pretty good Husky is Christian Harris. With his defensive background and his size. I think back to 2020, Alabama played Notre Dame in that national semifinal. And in matching up those teams 3 or 4 years ago, Notre Dame was a 4-2-5 kind of defense, and they stayed in it too. Clemson's done that in the past. They'll keep their 4-2-5 or even their base personnel on the field on 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. Not as much situational stuff I don't think we're going to see maybe moving forward in the future. I'll go with on offense, might be a surprise to you guys. My beneficiary of change, Jalen Milroe. And you go, well, and Jalen's going to have to make some strides in this offense, because I know we've heard from Kalen DeBoer and he talks about how he adapts to his offense. And I have no doubt that'll be the case. Things within his offense that you have to be able to carry out at the quarterback position. And they involve getting the ball out in a timely manner, accuracy. You're not going to become the offense that Alabama was a year ago. The expectation for Jalen is going to be, okay, we might incorporate a few of those things, very few of them, but at the end of the day, you're still going to have to be able to carry out what we're going to be moving forward. And I think if you're Jalen, you got to love that, because if your goal, which I'm sure it is, Jimmy, is to play in the National Football League, this almost feels like Jalen Hurts going to Oklahoma, except Jalen isn't having to go anywhere. He's got the offense coming to him. Now, with Jalen, it was a different circumstance. He got Tua-cated, I call it. It was a Tua barricade that obviously hit Jalen. But in going to Lincoln Riley and going to that offense, Jalen was able to really set the stage for himself. Now, he wasn't a first round, but in terms of readiness and preparing himself for the next level, if you're Jalen Milroe, you have to love this, don't you?
Well, look what happened to the last quarterback playing in this offense. I mean, I don't know that 2 years ago that a lot of us were talking about Michael Penix being a first round pick. I don't even know in September that we were talking about Michael Penix being a first round pick, but now there's a lot of that talk as no worse than a second round pick. And, he made tremendous strides in the same offense. This offense showed off. This offense showed that, hey, you can produce an NFL player out of this offense. It's not a gimmicky thing at all. There's a lot of pro throws you have to make to be successful in this offense. I also think there's a misnomer out there that offenses that throw it a lot are more complicated than other offenses. That's actually not the case at all. One of the more simple offenses to run in the entire country was Mike Leach's air raid offense. That was apparently involved extremely simple reads and was really easy for quarterbacks to learn. So just because DeBoer and Grubb throw it more often, even utilizing the deep parts of the field, even though they do it more often, we shouldn't assume that it's going to be very complex, because that's just not always the case. And it could be that Jalen Milroe or even Ty Simpson pick it up really quickly. And look, there's no doubting Milroe's arm. There's not a throw on the field he cannot make. He can make all the throws. With him, it's just a matter of consistency and decision-making and learning this new offense, which, again, might not be as complicated as it may look to some on the surface.
Clint, do you get the sense that the first day of spring practice, even though Austin Mack won't be the first guy up, that it's going to serve as, okay, this is what we're recruiting at the quarterback position. This is kind of how we envision the quarterback position at Alabama moving forward. You think that's sort of the message that maybe some of those other guys are going to heed from that, or will it matter at all? I think, I'll tell you what, boy, Dylan Lonergan to me also matches up well in this offense. A little bit we've seen from that dude in terms of anticipation and the ball coming out. I could see him very much in this mix too at some point down the road. But I think it's just going to be a fascinating opening to individual drills on day practice to kind of get an indication of where this thing's headed.
Yeah. And, one of the first things that I heard about Dylan Lonergan after he got to Tuscaloosa, he was going through some of the practices, some sources had got some eyes on him. One of the things that I heard from not just one, but multiple people is some variation of, this guy was just born to play quarterback. And when you actually watch him, you understand what they're talking about. He looks like a natural playing the position. Nothing ever seemed forced with him. He wasn't always making the correct reads or, knowing where to go with the football. He was a freshman like anybody else. He was making some freshman mistakes, but he looked like he had a good command. He looked super comfortable out there. And he just looked like a guy that's like, the game has to slow down for him a little bit. He's got to pick up the offense, know where he needs to go with the football, know his adjustments, his checks, all those different things, know where his eyes need to be. But once he gets that stuff down, it's just he's a natural at the position. And I think there's a misconception about DeBoer's and Grubb's offense where, like Jimmy said, he said it's not as complicated as you would think that it would be. And it's not for the offense. It's very complicated when you're trying to prepare for it. If you're a defensive guy, they throw a ton at you. It is very complicated. People have mentioned, I want to say Kyrie Jackson last week, he made mention that was the most complicated offense he had to ever prepare for. They throw a ton at you, but as an offensive guy, I don't think it's designed in a way where it's complicated for your offense because you have the advantage of knowing what you're doing. And while you're throwing a ton of different formations and different looks and using motion and doing all these different things that defenses have to recognize and read, that stuff's coming. You're comfortable with it. You do it in practice. So it's not this complex system overload for your offensive guys where it's complicated. And that's where I think the misconception is that it's very complicated for defenses. It's not overly complicated for your offense. And I think that's going to be beneficial for whoever ends up playing quarterback. I mean, pretty much everybody, the offensive line, they're going to have to do a lot of different things. Probably when you talk about the complexity of it, it's probably going to strain them more than any position, in my opinion. But it's not to a point where I think anybody's going to have trouble with it at all. And so, it's going to be a fun offense to watch. And I think Jalen Milroe, I think Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, Dylan Lonergan, all four of these guys, when you're trying to envision what the position is going to entail and what it's going to look like in 2024, I can see any four of those guys being the starter. And I would say Austin Mack still feels like he's probably a year away. Maybe Lonergan's still a year away too. We'll have to wait and see. But I think that, if any one of those four guys you told me right now they're going to be jogging out with the first team offense to start in the season opener, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, this offense, it seems like, wants to give you a lot pre-snap and then get you a little bamboozled looking at different formations, motions, and also getting you to identify what you're in to help the offense. And then all of that to get to the basis of this offense really is, whether it's route concepts, whether it's the run game. That seems to be a big part of it, no doubt about it. Hey, Jim, get us going on our next segment here. That's our early under the radar opponent for the Alabama Crimson Tide in 2024. Who do you got there? Maybe a stretch that it entails a certain team.
Well, for me, it's there's so much new, right? It's a new offense, it's a new defense. And, last year I anticipate, last year was a lot of new also, with a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback. And I was pointing to that Texas game the entire offseason as a game that really worried me, not so much of the specific matchup, but because of where it fell on the schedule. And in that sense, I'm going to bring up Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's coming off a season where they weren't too great. That this was not a great Wisconsin team at all. I think a lot of people expected them to be better in year one under Luke Fickell. They had a good transfer quarterback in Tanner Mordecai. I think folks thought Wisconsin would be a serious threat to win the Big Ten West and show up and give Michigan or Ohio State, wherever they're playing in the championship game, a good contest. But Wisconsin wasn't as good. So I think for that reason alone, Wisconsin will be a little under the radar because they're coming off a not great year. There's not a lot back either. Tyler Van Dyke will be the quarterback. He'll be new to the system, although we know that he's a pretty talented kid. It's on the road. It's game 3. Alabama played very poorly in game 3 on the road a year ago. And all of that attention and focus is going to be on the following game, the Georgia game. Alabama-Georgia might be the biggest in-season game all year long in college football in terms of hype and primetime kickoff and most likely ESPN game day and all that stuff. I think the looking ahead to Georgia, the fact Wisconsin's coming off a year in which they weren't great, but it's the first real test for DeBoer and on the road against, a quality Power 5 team. I think that's a game that we won't talk about enough, but is going to be a legitimate, difficult contest, all things considered.
First road game for Kalen DeBoer as Alabama head. Opening month's going to be interesting, man. All the parallels you'll be able to draw between Nick's first season at Alabama, Georgia came to Tuscaloosa in 2007. Alabama opened with Western Carolina, Western Kentucky going to open the Kalen DeBoer era. Yeah, I can see that certainly with Wisconsin and going on the road. What about you, Clint? Who do you got?
I mean, to me, I understand the Wisconsin look. I think it's beneficial that they have a bye week before Georgia. I think that's beneficial. But to me, it's Missouri. I mean, because you're talking, I still feel like Missouri is looked at as this, subpar SEC program. And overall, I mean, someone might have an argument there still, relative to the other powerhouses that are in this conference. Maybe they shouldn't be viewed as being just a dominant team or a dominant program. But for 2024, when you compare what's returning, with 2023, Brady Cook's coming back, Luther Burden, you got your head coach, you got your offensive coordinator, you got 3 starting offensive linemen coming back. You got Mookie Cooper, who I thought had a pretty good year last year at receiver, to be a complimentary piece to Burden. And it's following a road trip to Knoxville, which will be Kalen DeBoer's first experience with, facing Tennessee. It's going to be a tough environment. It is very beneficial that Alabama has they have 2 bye weeks this year, because when you look at the schedule, it goes Tennessee, Missouri, and LSU, and the 2, Tennessee and LSU, they're both on the road. So if you were actually having to play LSU at LSU the week after Missouri, it would be even more difficult. But I still think that following what should be a pretty tough physically fought game in Knoxville, playing a team like Missouri, I understand it's at home, that is beneficial. But I think that Missouri is a much better team than people are anticipating with what they have coming back. And I think that there's someone that we need to be keeping an eye on compared to, Georgia's obviously going to stand out, Tennessee, LSU, all these big games people are going to talk about. But Missouri is a tougher opponent than people realize.
After you get over sort of the sticker shock of the schedule, when it was initially dropped and you saw Georgia and Tuscaloosa, you knew Alabama would be going to LSU, and then you see at Oklahoma, you realize that it lays out pretty friendly to the Crimson Tide in terms of that multiple bye week scenario that you alluded to, Clint, because I'm with Jimmy on that trip to Wisconsin, but it's not a true sandwich game from a sense of after Wisconsin, you get the week off before Georgia. And just like you talked about, which would probably be my choice on this schedule, Oklahoma, it almost sounds slanderous to consider the Sooners an under the radar opponent, but I see some early power rankings, guys, for the SEC in 2024. I see Oklahoma down around 8 or 9, middle of the league. That's kind of hard for me to fathom, but I think the bye weeks where they fall definitely help Alabama from the traditional sandwich game standpoint. And, you bring in South Carolina, you go to Vanderbilt. Those games lead up to Tennessee. They seem to be pretty friendly in their own right when you think about that road trip to Knoxville. So, guys, let's get into our third topic on this edition of 3 for 3. And again, with another portal window coming up down the road, kind of hard to talk about this with any degree of true certainty, but an area, Jimmy, where you think an upgrade to this roster, to this team, might be required perhaps when that next window rolls around.
Yeah, I think there's a couple, or more than a couple, really. But number one to me, and to me, it's almost far and away, is offensive tackle. Just simply because when you look on the roster right now, let's say you couldn't add in the spring, and hey, you're playing this fall with what you got right now, then most likely the starting tackles would be Elijah Pritchett, who will be a redshirt sophomore, who played very little as a redshirt freshman, and when he played, he struggled, which most redshirt freshmen do, by the way. But Pritchett would be kind of back as the veteran, and then the other tackle would be a redshirt freshman, somebody who hadn't played at all, really, in Wilkin Formby or Miles McVay or even Naquil Bertrand. It would be one of those guys. So I think that's just not a comfortable situation where your tackles are a redshirt sophomore and a redshirt freshman who hasn't played. And yeah, these guys have upside. They're probably all going to be good players at some point, but you don't know that point is the fall of 2024. So I think signing at least one tackle that could come in and be an immediate starter, preferably on the left side, where then, okay, between Pritchett and those 3 redshirt freshmen, one of them is likely to be ready this fall, and you're a little more comfortable with those odds that one of the 4 will be ready instead of 2 of the 4. So I think signing at least one veteran offensive tackle that you have a ton of confidence in to man that left side would really change the look of the whole offense. Now you don't have to move guys around. There's talk of kicking Booker out to tackle, for instance, but now you've robbed the offensive line of its best guard, if you've done that. So I think offensive tackle is just a major priority as I see it.
It's like a slam dunk, Clint. Where do you go with this one?
Yeah, I mean, Granted, there are other positions we could talk about, particularly at cornerback. I think there's an argument to be made there. But the reason that offensive tackle is far and away the most important position is it's Kalen DeBoer. It's Ryan Grubb. It's that offense. Like, you have to be able to get effective play. That's what you brought this entire staff over for. You're banking on the fact that you can get a quality offense, put a quality offense on the field. And if you have a tackle, at least one tackle, maybe even two, that's really struggling, it can hinder everything you want to do offensively, or it can handicap you in what you can call and what you can do. And especially when you're trying to figure out, okay, who's going to be the best quarterback option? Like, quote unquote, you still are going to have a competition. You can't have, a 2021 leakage spot, like Alabama did that year, where it's just a team knows going in, this is a place we are going to be able to get consistent pressure on the quarterback pretty much every down. And then if we can get it from other spots because they're trying to compensate, then great. But this is going to be an area where we can win consistently. And, you, like Jimmy said, you got Elijah Pritchett, who does have that experience. I've kind of wondered, he's been groomed to be a left tackle. And I think he kind of was viewed as a left tackle as far as his building stuff in a, Tommy Reese, Eric Wolford style of offense where it's built really on power. I mean, you got a 360-pound tackle on the other side. Obviously, you had a 369-pound tackle in Caden Proctor at left tackle. But I think when you view right versus left, the more powerful guy is going to be on the right side, or the bigger guy. Well, I mean, in this offense, with it being a little bit more finesse, Elijah Pritchett might be better suited for the right side. And the fact that he can bring that power element at that spot, but he's got the athleticism, the left tackle look where, you can protect, and he's not, protecting your quarterback's blind side, but he's also, you're keeping him protected in the sense of, not as much responsibility going on with the right tackle as it is the left tackle. So that's something that I've thought about with that position. Who ends up manning the left tackle spot? Hopefully, obviously it would be great if Wilkin Formby or Miles McVay or Naquil Bertrand, I always get his name wrong. If one of those three guys could step up and man, one of the two tackle spots, that would be fantastic. But I think you at least need to have one tackle, if not two, like Jimmy said. But it can't just be adding bodies. You need to be adding quality. So at least one. Hopefully you can get two who are starting caliber players and can compete. But if it's just one, then that would certainly help.
Yeah, maybe an NIL opportunity for Naquil. Naquil, he helps DLs get their Z's. For NyQuil.
You might be a marketing guy. That's pretty. That's solid.
I don't know. That's dad jokeville is what that is. But no, I think you guys are on it with the offensive tackle position. We talk about beneficiaries of change. Elijah Pritchett's got to be on that list too, right? And I think Clint hit on some reasons why, because when I watch Washington and I look at the size of their guys and kind of the emphasis of what they had on their offensive line, they had some big dudes, don't get me wrong, but they weren't 360 at the tackles, not even close. I mean, Roger Rosengarten, 300, 305 at tackle, 310, something like that. So there you go with the offensive tackle. I think the secondary is sort of reasonable, at least going into spring practice, because as it sits right now, you talk about unknowns on the back end of that defense. Once you get past Malachi Moore, I mean, we did see Damani Jackson a good bit at SC last season. I mean, he was essentially a starter at corner, but and as talented as this new group is, you might be asking a lot of those guys. I'll give you another one too. There's going to be some eyeballs on, you talk about first or a big right shoe. How about Connor Talty with Will Reichard moving on? And as a scholarship guy, a highly recruited guy a couple of years ago, the expectation is that Connor will step right in and be fine. I like that they got him some semblance of game experience last season. It wasn't much. He didn't kick 6 or 7 field goals, but we did see him make a nice tackle against Mississippi State. So that was good. But yeah, those are some good choices. And you know what? Something else I wanted to hit on with you guys is going back to the beneficiaries of change. Maybe guys that this isn't a good change for, whether it's attrition or guys back. I mean, a guy that's interested, I'm not sure yet one way or the last is what Alabama going to be moving forward is for Kendrick Law, because we talk so much about wide receivers and how it's going to be a position of prominence and all these things in this new offense. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Clint, how does Kendrick Law fit into all of this besides special teams? I'm talking about just offensively. How do you envision him in this?
It's interesting because I would have thought that Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb would have, been very beneficial for a guy like Kendrick Law. With his skill set, I feel like they understand how to utilize him, and I do think that they will. I think they'll figure out some creative ways to get him involved. But Jeremy Bernard coming in, he does a lot of similar things. He's not the same guy, but as far as what you can do with him, lining him up in the backfield, playing him a little bit in some inline spots, letting him be physical as far as being a blocker, getting him in motions on jets, doing a lot of those different things. He can also be that player, and he's got the familiarity factor. So are you going to have multiple guys that you're moving around in kind of that, what everybody likes to call the Deebo Samuel role? Or is Kendrick Law, just due to his skill set, going to have to kind of take a back seat to Bernard in 2024? Like, I think that they'll figure out a way to get them both involved. I think having two of those guys and the fact that you have that versatility with two different players, it can allow you to be very flexible in what you can do, in my opinion. But, that's something that makes me kind of question, what will his role be? How big of an impact will he make? And so when you're talking about guys who benefited, I was looking at the receivers, and it's like Isaiah Bond's gone, Jermaine Burton's gone, plus you're bringing in an excellent wide receivers coach, an excellent offense for receivers. So I was looking at these receivers and trying to decide, okay, I would say that there are several that could end up benefiting. And, Emmanuel Henderson probably didn't cross my mind as much as it probably should have. When Jimmy brought it up, I thought that was a pretty good point by him. But Jalen Hale was the one that did come to mind. I think that he can end up being a great fit in this offense just from his physicality, the fact that he can win vertically, 50-50 balls, do some of those things. I think that's something that you might see in this offense, the fact that they like to press the ball vertically. You look at a guy like Kobe Prentice being primarily a slot guy. Can he play outside? Because I think Bernard's going to predominantly play on the inside. So I considered him, but then you look at that. So this wide receiver room is really interesting. A lot of talent. I think they're going to get plenty of production out of the room. Obviously, Ryan Williams is going to be an inside-out guy, move him around, create some opportunities for him. He'll probably be involved somewhere there. I don't know if it'll necessarily be as a starter. It could be as the fourth receiver, the fifth receiver in year one. We'll have to wait and see how ready he is or isn't. We got to remember he was supposed to be a high school senior this upcoming season, so that's something to keep in mind. But, I would say Kendrick Law and just his skill set, I like how it could potentially fit into DeBoer's offense. But there are some hiccups and obstacles that kind of make me question exactly what his role will end up being.
What about it, Jimmy? Do you look at Kendrick as just sort of a guy who transcends, a particular designation? We love to pigeonhole guys. This guy is an X, this guy is a Y, this guy is a Z at the receiver positions. But it seems like more and more playmaker is what it comes down to for a lot of these coaches and a lot of these offenses. In other words, if you can run, you can make plays, and you're physical, there's usually a place for you, isn't there?
Yeah. The thing that strikes me about Kendrick Law that's so interesting, well, a couple of things. Number one, we're approaching Super Bowl weekend, and I think we've all read the comps to Deebo Samuel. Kendrick Law's a lot like Deebo, and I think he is. I think physically that's a really similar guy to what we see of the San Francisco 49ers, Deebo Samuel. But what's interesting to me about Kendrick is my first trait when I think of him is physicality, because the way he's built. This kid is ripped to shreds. He has one of the better bodies on the team in terms of how he's absolutely just ripped from head to toe. He's built like a linebacker, yet he's the fastest guy in the wide receiver room per guys on the team that consistently state that Kendrick Law is the fastest guy on the team. That's incredible. That combination of being built like he is, and he's the fastest guy. So he's a fun toy that I think Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer get to play with here, because how many times do you have that where the most physical guy in the wide receiver room is also the fastest guy? So I'm intrigued, because I think the challenge to Kendrick Law is, hey, 2 years from now, let's not be talking about how big and fast you are. Let's talk about what a great football player you are, because big and fast is great, but big and fast is great at track and field. Big and fast is great at a bunch of things, but you need to be a great football player or it's just not going to work for you. So we need some production out of Kendrick Law that we haven't seen yet, and not just be wowed by his size and his speed.
Yeah, if I'm Kendrick, I love the versatility and the potential for that in any offense, but there needs to be an aspect to all this that you can kind of go back to. And I think for him, it's going to be continued polish as a route runner, legitimacy as a wide receiver. Yeah, it's nice to be able to line him up in the backfield and line him up even as sort of a tight end type from time to time. Love to see him continue. I think that's where Shepard coming in as a wide receivers coach is going to help all those guys. Not that Holman Wiggins didn't do a nice job, but I mean, the proof is kind of in the pudding here in the last few years from what we've seen from the Washington offense. Well, we got Super Bowl Sunday coming up, guys, and it looks like it's going to be, isn't it, pretty much almost a Bama-free Super Bowl with the Chiefs and the 49ers. Do you have a rooting interest, guys? Do you have a pick for us here on 3 for 3 on Super Bowl Sunday? Clint, we'll start with you.
After Cam Newton called Brock Purdy a game manager, I'm pulling for Brock Purdy and the 49ers. I just want to be able to. I won't be the one. I normally am the one, but I won't be the one. I'll let the 49ers fans handle it. But I just want someone to quote tweet Cam after Brock Purdy wins the Super Bowl and says, "Well, he got something you didn't." So that as soon as I saw that he said that, I'm like, well, that just decided it for me, because it was a toss up. Didn't really care either way. Some people, I understand, being sick of Alabama when you're watching Kansas City pretty much now in the conversation seemingly every year. It's like, okay, I would rather see someone else win it. So, yeah, I'm going for the 49ers.
What about it, Jimmy?
Yeah, it's easy to pull for Brock Purdy for all sorts of reasons, including the Cam quote. I like all game managers myself, because I just feel like it's it's a soapbox thing for me, because I think fans use game manager as some sort of slur, and coaches use game managers to win championships. All his coaches are like, yeah, game manager, I'll take one of those. While fans are like, oh, he's a game manager. Like that's some sort of terrible thing to call the plays and run the plays as executed and stay out of bad plays and don't turn the ball over and all the things that a quarterback does to make sure that his coach still has a job the next day. But nevertheless, but I do pull for Brock. I'm also a Mahomes fan, because how can you not be? He's the state of the art. I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback playing football today. I love watching the game played at its highest level, and watching Mahomes play quarterback is watching the position played at its highest level. So in that sense, I'm a Mahomes guy.
Plus, you're a big Swiftie. Let's tell the people what they really want to hear.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So put it out there.
Yeah, we know why you're pulling for the Chiefs. It's okay.
I've seen Taylor twice.
You guys think? Remember in the 2021 draft, there was talk about Mac Jones being a 49er. You think Mac thinks about that right about now?
Probably not as much as I do. I think about it a lot. I mean, because I really think he would be one of the better. I think in Shanahan's system, he would have thrived.
I mean, he could Brock Purdy this thing, couldn't he?
Oh, yeah. There's not a doubt in my mind. I'm a Brock Purdy fan, but I still, people are going to call me crazy, but I don't know. I think Mac could have even been a better option for the 49ers had they went that route.
Great example of how fit means everything in football. Fit means everything. This piece and this spot. There are just very few examples of a guy like Mahomes who you could put in 32 QB rooms in the NFL, and he's going to be just as good at every place. But that list is very, very short of guys that would thrive in any system in pro football. But boy, Mac would be great in that Brock Purdy offense.
And ask 10 people, by the way, for a running back, a tight end, or a wide receiver on the New England Patriots roster. and see how many of those folks can give you one of
You
those.
probably still get a
And
lot
in
of
San
Damian
Francisco,
Harris's.
you got McCaffrey, you got Kittle, you got Debo, you got Ayuk. I mean, that's huge too. I mean, I like Brock Purdy as well. I can't pick against Patrick Mahomes yet. You know, he seems to thrive in these situations. So I'm not going to go against Mahomes or Kelsey. And look, that defense did what it needed to do in the AFC Championship game. Going to have to be physical against this 49er team on both. Should be a lot of fun out in Vegas. How about a Super Bowl in Vegas? You talk about taboo, or what seemed to be taboo just 7-8 years ago. Now we got a Super Bowl. We got a team in Vegas. We got a Super Bowl in Vegas. I think we're going to have college football playoffs in Vegas, NCAA tournaments in Vegas.
Do you think there will be any bets placed this weekend on the Super Bowl in Vegas?
Could be.
You want to know what's going to be crazy is LSU opens next season in Vegas. Imagine that fan base in Vegas for
that
SC.
Fan base. I might join them. I might fly out there myself just to
Yeah.
experience it.
I'm having visions of Uncle Eddie from the Vacation movie, you know, up in Vegas. It's gonna be a trip for sure. Hey guys, it's been a lot of fun. As always, appreciate both of you taking the time, bringing unparalleled insight and just good stuff here for us on the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. Clint, Jimmy, we'll do it again soon.
Looking
Good
forward
stuff.
to it.
Appreciate you, fellas.
For Clint Lamb and Jimmy Stein, thanking you once again for joining us here on the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, we certainly hope you'll do that right now. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our video content as it drops. Yeah. And also, of course, you want to join us at BamaOnline.com, the Roundtable, our premium message board. No better place to hang out and get your Bama fix than with us right there on the Roundtable at BamaOnline.com. For Clint, Jimmy, Travis, thanks again. Until next time, so long, everybody.